Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN.com.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for watching another edition of The Small Business Show right here at ASBN.com. Intellectual property is one of a small business's most valuable and most misunderstood assets. So how can owners protect what they create? Today we're joined by Alex Montagu, founding partner at MontaguLaw, also author of Intellectual Property, Money and Power in a New Era. He's also a speaker and intellectual property expert to explain the basics of IP and what every small business should know about safeguarding their ideas. Alex, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
It's great to be here.
Talk to us about the importance of small business owners really protecting their intellectual property, their logos, the content that they push out, and because I think this is often an overlooked area, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the world we live in and just how different it is to even 30 years ago, so much of business is done online. And if everything that we do online is protected by intellectual property, it's intellectual property. So it's an important issue because you really need to understand what these protections are.
Yeah.
A lot of people have a misunderstanding of, what their rights are, and it's understandable because it's quite complicated. But there's a lot of talk about it.
Yeah.
But people don't really understand how each of these things work. So I think we could discuss at least some of them, if you like, on this call.
Absolutely. I think business owners open up. They have the name of their business that they feel is protected. Maybe they come up with a logo design. Maybe they come up with some descriptions, or to your point, they put things out there on the internet that may be theirs. It also might be an infringement on somebody else's that's out there if they haven't done their homework correctly, right? Talk to us about that.
Exactly. So let's start with the name of the business. I mean, that's something that every business has.
Yeah.
And the business might have more than one name. So there's maybe the name of the business, but they maybe also have a product. Sometimes those could be the same. For example, if you look at Coca-Cola, that's the name of the company. It's also the name of their product. It isn't always the case. For example, Unilever, you might not have heard of Unilever, you might have, but it has a lot of products, that are separate. Okay, so all of these names come under the rubric of trademarks. And, people a lot of times think that they understand what this is, but, they find out the hard way. And usually a lot of people understand or don't understand, or understand what they don't know. They come to me when it's too late. They're already in a dispute and they don't understand how they got there.
Right.
So let's talk about a trademark. Just because you go and you name your business, whatever it is, and you manage to get that name on the state, you get an LLC registered in that name.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you own that name.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you own that trademark.
That's right.
Right? There is a trademark registry. Okay, but this is a federal trademark registry. And that is where you need to look in order to see if the name that you've adopted and you want to use is already taken, is someone else is using a name that is substantially similar in the same area as yours.
Yeah, that's right.
Very few people do that. Large companies routinely check these things.
That's
and
right.
Before they adopt a new name, they have a procedure. But this is one area where I see small businesses fall down all the time. They get attached to a name and then they think that that's my name. I own that name. Well, you don't necessarily.
Right.
So in the US, and this is also very important, is that these rights are territorial. So if you have rights in a trademark in the US, you don't have rights in a trademark in the UK or in the EU or in Canada. So you have to look at each country separately. This is also a big misunderstanding. But the first step for any small business that's launching is to first check what we call a clearance check and see if the name that you're choosing as your business name is available to be used.
That's right.
And not develop an emotional attachment to a name that is taken by someone else.
Yeah.
Because it's going to come back and it's going to haunt you.
That's right.
Later on.
And
So that's one example.
And a check of the name doesn't mean you go onto Google and you type in the name to see if there's any other companies out there, right? It could very well be that it's a company that's not even doing a whole lot of business, or maybe they don't even have a website, but they do have a company under that name, and they have an LLC, and they've done all their homework, and they own the rights to that name. Just because you didn't find it on Google or now ChatGPT doesn't mean a company doesn't exist, right?
That's exactly right. So there are specialized searches that we conduct and others conduct, other lawyers conduct, to see if the name is registered or is actually being used. So this is also important to remember that in the US, you don't have to have a trademark registration in order to gain rights, trademark rights in the name. Use can also give you rights. That isn't the case all over the world.
Okay.
For reasons that I don't really want to go into now. It's historical.
Sure,
But,
sure.
you know, in the EU, primarily, it's based on registration. It's the first to register. In the US, it's the first to use, though registration does confer a lot of benefits.
Right.
So the answer to your question, simple answer to your question is no, you don't go on Google to see if the name is available. You conduct what we call a comprehensive search for that name.
For the layperson out there or the entrepreneur, can that be done by themselves, or do you usually have to seek the advice of an attorney, a trademark attorney, for that?
Yes. What they could do for themselves, I mean, they could look on Google, and if they see a name that is identical to theirs being used by another company, they can rule out.
That kind of takes care of that.
Right, exactly. But they can't use Google to rule out definitively. So what they need to do, there are specialized companies that actually run these searches.
Yeah.
And law firms, lawyers review them because it's one thing to run the search. It's another thing to review it and decide whether or not the names out there are too close.
That's right.
Whether they're infringing or not. So, you know, that's something that a lawyer has to do. And that's something that is really, there's a lot of litigation in this area that people actually don't realize, you know, of people suing each other over over whether or not one trademark infringes on another one. And the legal fees could also be very high in those situations.
That's right.
And of course, the remedy is that you have to stop using the name.
That's right.
If you lose.
There's a popular case where I think it was a bike company, if I'm not mistaken, that came out and said "Bikes are us," and they flipped around the R, much the way Toys R Us was using, the name, and Toys R Us came in and said, no, that's too close. You're leading the consumer to believe that is owned by Toys R Us or Kids R Us or what have you, which we own all of those brands. And they said, no, these are bikes. This is our company. It's Bob's, Bikes are us. And of course, Toys R Us won to say, no, it's too close. So just because you've changed one or two things in the name, that, to your point, doesn't mean you're not infringing on another company's rights to use that name.
Yes, and at the end of the day, the test here is whether or not consumers are likely to be confused between the two brands.
Right.
That's the test that the court will apply.
Sure.
So in that particular case, the question is, whether the use of that R, which is very well known, is going to lead people to think that this product has something to do with Toys R Us.
That's right.
That would be the question. So this is the sort of thing that you're going to be checking to avoid being sued by Toys R Us and other companies.
And I think there's a lot of small business owners that start out thinking, well, it's just in my I bake cookies, and I bake a really good cookie, and I'm doing it in my neighborhood, and it's Susie's Cookies. And therefore, I don't know if I have to go through all of this. And then all of a sudden, you find out that now the Susie's Cookies is doing pretty good. They want to franchise, okay? Well, as you know, because you're in this field, you can't franchise anything if you don't own the name to it. So now, lo and behold, Susie finds out that there's already a Susie's Cookies. They've been around 20 years. And even though Susie has 4 or 5 shops and they've got some franchisees that are interested, you got to change your name. And that can be a very devastating exercise for a small business, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, this happened in New York with a restaurant. You know, there was a restaurant that opened. I think it was called Sophie's. I don't remember. This is a long time ago in the
Hmm.
90s. And sure enough, there was another one, and they had the one had registered the trademark, and they had to change the name.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's exactly the situation you're describing. So it's not just that you won't be able to franchise, you might actually have to change the name of your business.
Exactly, exactly.
So
What advice? You've given some great advice already. What advice do you have for small business owners that are listening to us have this discussion, that they're looking at their sign or their letterhead and they're going, "Uh-oh, I never checked this thing. I went online and I found out that there's not another shoe company like mine by the same name, but I didn't do this search," which, by the way, folks, is very common. You're not alone. A lot of people start businesses and they don't do this. But if that is the case, what advice do you have for them now? What should they do now?
well, if they've been using the name
Hmm.
already and they didn't conduct any clearance searches, I would suggest that they do that now
Yeah.
just to see what the situation is,
Hmm. Hmm.
and um, to see if, for example, if they are potentially infringing. And, one thing that I can say is that as time goes on, and you don't, let's say 10 years goes by or 20 years goes by. I had a situation where, someone came to me with a registration and said, oh, this other company is infringing, and they had an identical name. And I looked and I said, yeah, it looks like they're infringing. Oh, but they've been using the name for 25 years
Yeah.
and there hasn't been any confusion. Okay, in that situation, the one who owns the trademark is going to have a very hard time enforcing the trademark.
Right.
So, uh, so if you've been using it for a long time, then you might get some, you might be able to, assert a defense if a prior registrant asserts rights.
Right.
So it's a good idea to understand what your rights are. This is what I'm suggesting. You have to understand what your rights are. The other thing that you need to do is you need to police and make sure that others aren't infringing on yours. I
Yeah.
mean,
Good point.
people, you can lose the rights to your trademark
Yeah.
if others continue to use it and you do nothing about it.
That's right. That's right. Very good point.
So,
Very good point. Yeah, you got to send a cease and desist and say, hey, this is the name, and we've been using it, and all of these things I recommend. And as I have before, you've heard me say this before to our audience, and that is that getting an attorney that specializes in this area, as many small business attorneys will do, because it's very much a part of opening up a business. You've got your LLC, you've got your partnership agreements, you have things like that. Well, right up there is going to be, what are you going to call this company, and did we do a search of it? But this is not an area that you want to leave out. And yeah, it's I don't want to say it's very costly. It's not that bad. I think the last time I checked, it was around $2,500 to do a full search in the U.S. Of course, I'm ballparking this. But you know what's really expensive? Changing your company name on all of your stores 5 years later and saying, uh-oh, we got to now rebuild a whole new brand with another name because we found out we were infringing on something. So this is one of those things
yes,
you don't want to leave out, right?
it's critical.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I found is that it's interesting with small businesses. Um, so I've been doing this for over 30 years now. So I've had some businesses that have started in the 90s and have suddenly grown,
Yeah.
and
Sure.
have become multinationals,
Wow. Yeah.
expanded
Yeah.
overseas. So you don't know what your situation is at the beginning,
That's right.
when you're first starting.
Yeah.
Okay, so if the business doesn't work and it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't go anywhere. But if the business becomes successful and you don't own your name,
Yeah.
you're going to have a lot of difficulties. And one of the so it's a no-brainer to do this
Yeah,
right up
it really
front
is. It really
in
is.
your home jurisdiction, which is the US.
That's right.
Now, the more difficult question, and this has come up for me for some of my clients, is that as businesses become so international,
Yeah,
people are doing business across borders.
that's right.
And as I started by this conversation by saying these rights are territorial. So the question, it becomes more expensive if you start to go outside of the US and say, okay, I want to have protections outside of the US
Sure.
because I'm doing business outside the US. So I want to, not infringe someone else in the EU, or in China or wherever it is that you want to do business. And two, I want to be able to stop others from copycatting me.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the thing is that a lot of people don't realize, that let's say that you're a small business that produces, I don't know, luggage. You've got a business, you've decided to, make luggage, and your luggage is being made for you in China, and they're affixing your brand onto the luggage in China.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to have a problem if you don't have a registration for that brand in China, for that mark in China. Somebody else could go and register the mark, and they do this. There's a cottage industry of people going out there
sure.
and registering.
Sure.
So they could register the mark in
Yep.
China, and I'm telling you this because this has happened
Yeah.
to my clients. And then suddenly, you're not able to manufacture.
That's right.
Okay, so you're not even selling in China. You're not
Yeah.
doing anything. You're just getting manufacturing there.
That's
But
right.
then you can't manufacture. So my point is that this is something that you need to look at strategically, as you said, when you're launching your business. Okay, so you're having your LLC, your intellectual property strategy should be up front and center.
That's right. No question about it.
So and trademarks is part of that, and you need to look at what is my trademark strategy here.
Now, Alex, the reality though is that for small business owners that are, they're usually on a tight budget and they're trying to get as much done that they possibly can. When is a good time, maybe I should say a more realistic time, to search other countries and take that cost on to say, would this name be good in the UK? What about Canada? What about Mexico to the south of us? What about Australia? Is that something that you recommend right up front, or is that something that might come with time or more money as the revenue comes in?
Well, this is what I'm saying. It's part of your IP strategy. You have to sit down with your advisor. I would suggest that you get a lawyer and you talk that through. You talk about, okay, what is my budget?
Right.
And what do I want to do? And, how much protection can I afford? Where, this is all, obviously there's no point going abroad before your business, you know what I mean?
Right. That's what I'm saying. So for the small business, we don't want to scare everybody out there. But what we are saying is this is a reality. And to your point about doing business outside the U.S. borders, it's a reality, because if you've got a website and somebody goes on your website and they're in Australia and they order your products and they say, great, ship these to Australia, you're now doing business in Australia, right?
Yes.
Same holds true at the UK or Canada. So even though you don't think, well, I don't have stores in Australia or I don't have stores in the UK, I only have stores or a location here in America, but do you ship out to these other countries? And if the answer is yes to that, then to your point, you're a multinational company, right?
Yeah, it's yes, you are, and if you're shipping to those other places, you're obviously, there are other laws that you need to look at as well.
Right.
But my point is that right up front, there are these things that when you're launching a business, there are these things that you need to look at. Just even setting up your website.
Yeah.
Okay, so who's doing that? We have to bear in mind that the person that creates the website, that builds the website, owns the intellectual property rights to that website.
Yeah. This is a whole nother show, by the way.
So you, as the owner,
Right.
don't. So, you need to have an agreement with
That
that company to make sure that,
that is so true. That is without a
ownership rights are
doubt.
yours,
That's right.
that, in the event that they stop working on it, that they will agree to transition to a different
Yep.
provider,
That's right.
right?
And
And
also
this is,
these, if you go on Fiverr or you go on Upwork or some of these freelance companies, if you don't have an agreement with them in place and they do work for you, it could be also understood by that individual that no, I own this work unless I've signed something that says it gives you rights to that, right?
yes. So this is the thing about, I started by saying the world has changed,
Yeah,
and intellectual property has become a lot more important
that's right.
because the underlying assets, like 50 years ago, the underlying assets that people had were tangible,
Right.
right?
Yeah, of course.
So you,
You had
you
a
owned, you
newspaper,
had
you
it,
had a
you had
magazine.
possession of it.
Right, right.
So then you would send it. So it wasn't as, I mean, but today, this is all intangible stuff.
That's right. That's right.
And so if you need to pay attention to who owns it, because yes, if someone creates a work of intellectual property that, a copyright, that is protected by copyright, for example,
Yeah.
and you don't have an agreement with them, then it's theirs.
Yep. That's right.
So you need to pay attention to your intellectual property strategy.
Yep.
Also, I think that people don't have an understanding of what these rights are. If they're doing business, they don't understand what their intellectual property assets are.
Right.
They don't know whether is it a software? Is that protected by copyright? Do you need to get a patent? What about algorithms? Algorithms protected by, confidentiality and as a trade secret. So having an understanding of what you own and how to protect it is front and center.
That's right. That's right. No question
And
about
so
it.
all these decisions have to be made up front. And I think that one of the problems that you point to is the question of budget.
Right.
Because people don't think about this.
No, they don't.
And then it can become a problem much later on. So it's
that's right.
very good in my view to, just as you, I mean, okay, so you're going to budget some money to get an LLC.
Yeah.
You're
Or,
going
or,
to,
an accountant to set up your
or an
books.
accountant
Right.
to set up your books. Or
you
you're going
need-
to
Right.
hopefully have a shareholders agreement,
Yeah.
or an LLC operating agreement. I mean, which I mean, people sometimes don't, but that can end in tears if you
That's
don't.
right.
So, that also costs money. Or as you said, an accountant. I
Yeah.
mean, so this is, in my view, equally as important. I mean,
Oh, I agree. I agree. Maybe more so in some cases.
Maybe
but
more. It's what you
yeah,
own.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Or you don't.
Yeah.
And you don't, you don't realize.
You hear so much today about what's your brand and building your brand and your company is your brand and you are your brand. Well, at the end of the day, that might all well be true, but at the end of the day, you also might find out that somebody else owns that brand that you've been pushing out there on social media and on your sign and whatever the case might be, and we don't want that to happen. So for sure, for those of you that are listening, if you've not started your business yet, you definitely want an Alex at the table for sure. If not Alex himself. So, but you want an Alex at the table, just like you have a good accountant, and just like you've got an attorney, probably the same, hopefully the same, that does that sets up your LLC and your partnership agreement, your managing agreements, and what have you. These are all the foundation before you sell the first product. These are the things. This is on the checklist of things you've got to address.
Critical. You're going to do business online on social media. A lot of people do this.
That's right.
You want to put videos on social media. Okay. Who's making those videos? The person who makes the videos,
That's right.
and do you have the right to make the videos? Do you have the right to use the music in the videos? Do you have the right to use the images in the videos? Okay, you could go do it, but later on you could have a lot of issues. And then once you put the video out there, what if you're, are you protecting it?
Right. That's
Are
right.
you protecting it sufficiently, or are you, as anyone else is allowed to go and copy it?
That's right.
All of these things, that people don't, small businesses, I'm telling you, large businesses, I have clients that are large businesses. They consult me all the time
Of
because
course.
they want to
Yeah.
make sure, yeah,
Of
all the
course.
time, all the
Yep.
time, all the
Yep.
time on all of these things.
It's also why you see
This,
so many, you'll see big businesses and pharmaceuticals, they'll come out with a name that you're like, where did they get that name from? Well, they created the name in many cases to ensure that there's no other product like this out there. So it kind of like the name Exxon. They came up with Exxon because they knew that there's
yes,
no other oil company or company that is spelled or this is the name. So they're pretty sure globally that Exxon's going to work. They created that word, or that
yes,
name. So we're not suggesting that you go that big, but the reality is that what Alex is talking about right now, folks, is really where the rubber meets the road. You don't have anything if you don't own your name and you don't own your trademark, and it's legit. I'll tell you something else too, that a couple of deals that I know were not made, and these are deals where somebody was going to exit their company. And the company buying that individual's company said, great, we just got to go down a checklist here in our due diligence. Can we see where you own the name, the trademark? And they said, oh, well, we never actually did that, okay? Well, time out a minute. I'm not going to pay you millions of dollars for a company and you don't even know if you own this name right now. So until you do that, we're not buying anything. Because in many cases, they don't want to open up a can of worms and find out they just paid $20 million for your company and somebody comes knocking to go, you got to change your brand because I own that. So that is at the top of that checklist on a due diligence when you go to sell. So now do I have your attention?
yeah. I mean, that is definitely the case. That the IP due diligence is going to include your trademarks, but it's also going to include um, whether or not you own your app,
That's right. Yeah,
whether or
good
not
point.
you
Good
own
point.
your website,
That's right.
all
Yeah.
of those things that you use to do
And that
business
you thought you owned.
that you think you own,
Right.
but that you might not
That's right.
because you didn't, and people find out the hard way. I mean, they get into a dispute with the person that created the app for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, well, that's my app. Well,
Yeah,
where's your contract?
that's right. That's
Right?
right. Yeah.
Where's your contract? So you've got to have those agreements in place. The other place that I would recommend that small businesses fall down is that they very often don't have the proper agreements in place with their customers.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
And they don't have agreements in place with their customers, or they don't have a correct agreement in place with their customers, which would also deal with how the customer can use the business's intellectual property,
Right.
or potentially if the business is accessing the customer's intellectual property, or if the business is accessing some confidential information, or accessing
Oh, yeah. That's right.
personally identifiable information. So this is another place where it's a very simple fix for a small business to have an agreement. And this is another area also that people have a misunderstanding. They think that if they just put terms and conditions on a website,
They're good to go.
then they're protected.
Right.
And they'll go and copy some terms and conditions from another website and put it there, and lo and behold, that doesn't work because they're not signed, they're not tailored to the situation we're talking about. So this is also another area that I highly recommend to small businesses. Again, big businesses will not do business with you without a signed
Very good point.
agreement.
Very good point.
And,
Yep.
and because everything is such intangibles, that becomes even more important.
That's right.
To have an agreement that deals with that, especially, I mean, in all industries,
Yeah.
but because everything that people are doing are protected by IP. We're not selling. There was a time when the main industry was commerce. We would sell tomatoes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We would. Okay, if you're going to sell a bunch of tomatoes and you don't have a written agreement, you're not going to deliver them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Sure.
and there's a commercial code around that. That's not the case anymore. What we're selling is much more complicated. We're slicing and dicing
That's right.
intangibles. And there's a lot of misunderstanding around who owns what.
That's right. That's right.
And that's why you
right.
need to pay attention to all of these different areas.
Yep. No question.
Yep.
No question about it. Alex Montagu, who's the founding partner at MontaguLaw and is an incredible author, speaker, and intellectual property expert, as you can see. He's the guy that you want in your corner when you're starting a business, or even if you got in trouble and you go, oh, this has already happened to me and I need the advice. So we'll put all the information on the screen here. But and we also learned a new way to say tomato here in the U.S. It's really tomato. So you've been saying it wrong, folks. But Alex, thank you so much. I would love to do a follow-up with you because you're opening up some of these other boxes that I know the audience is going to go, oh, that's good stuff. We want to learn more about that. So
can I just finish with this?
Absolutely. Yep.
Because there's so much misunderstanding around this area. It's a complex area, but people kind of think they watch something on TV or they think, oh, I understand this. I wrote a book about, 2012, a long time ago now, called Intellectual Property, Money and Power in a New Era, which tries to explain, what is intellectual property,
right,
and, how does it apply for different businesses across different industries.
Sure.
And sort of it's written not for lawyers, but it's written for people who want to really understand, what is a copyright? What does it actually protect? What's a trademark? What's a patent? What's a trade secret? How do these things, sort of interact? What's the right of privacy? What's the right of publicity? All of these things that, sound very sort of mysterious.
Yeah.
They're not, and you can just read something, and you don't need to read my book. You could read any book.
No. We're showing a copy of the book right now. We're also going to provide a link right underneath the video that you're watching currently, folks, so you can click that video and get the book. I mean, click that link and get the book. And I highly recommend that you do just that, because if it's written in kind of layman's terms, which I'm sure that's what it is, for you to understand this area better, that's a great start, without a doubt. But I will tell you, I'd love to have you back to talk to the audience about the difference between copyright and trademark, because I think those two things are often misunderstood, and they're kind of interchangeable. And people will say, "Well, I have a copyright on it." Well, no, you don't really have a copyright on it. It's a trademark you're looking for. So that's a whole nother show that I would love to delve into.
Why don't we do that? Because it's not just copyright and trademark, but it's also patents that people get confused about.
That's right. Good point.
And also the intersection with rights of publicity.
Yep.
And trade secrets.
That's right. Okay, I'm gonna hold you to that show then. My producer will be reaching out to you. So, Alex, thank you so much for joining us on the show. This has been great. Really appreciate it.
It's great being here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN.com.